Good morning to you, Lydia. How are you? It's the 2nd of February and Monday morning. How are you holding up this morning? Or
Morning.
are you a
Yes, it's
rainy
supposed to be the
days
month of
and
love.
Monday?
Eh?
Is
Rainy
that's
days.
right. That's right. Rainy days and Mondays always get me down, Karen Carpenter says. So I don't know if you're
Ah,
a rainy days character or crony. Maybe you are. Maybe you
nope, no, I'm sun all the way. So that's why I'm
are.
smiling
Okay.
today.
Okay,
And
you're the
it's the month of
sunshine
love.
girl.
So it's
Okay,
February.
okay. I'll forgive you for it being the month of love. That's all right.
Jeez.
I
Thanks,
can
eh?
live with that. I can live with that, daughter.
Mhm.
Okay, we're looking at number 16 on our list because we are using a fractal trajectory. Groot woorde, right? A fractal is an iterative pattern, a repetitive pattern that can be used over and over again to measure something. A fractal trajectory to measure or assess a person's growth stage. Because at no point are we not checking each other out. As a husband, you check your wife out 24/7. She's checking you out. Are you being lazy? Are you being loving? Are you being unkind? We check each other out all the time. It's just a thing we do. Of course, it's how we deal with what we're checking out, right? Or have checked out. So this morning we're going to look at risks uh, to divergent thinking and rewriting narratives. Divergent thinking. Lydia, come talk to us. What is a divergent thinker?
Um, I thought my understanding initially was divergent. You're going off the path. It's moving away from something divergent. Um, I don't know if out of the box is a correct
That would be a good illustration.
picture to
You're thinking
use. Yeah.
outside the box, out of the box. I always say, think beyond the box. There is no box anymore. So just keep thinking.
Mm.
Divergent, different than I thought before, different than what is accepted or acceptable thinking. There are risks to that. And of course, the risk also has to do with not just thinking that way, but rewriting the narrative, rewriting the container that you use that talks about your divergence. In other words, rewriting the story. Narratives contain stories. The narrative is the container, the story is the content. I think in Western culture, we tend to use story and narrative almost interchangeably. But to
Yeah.
be more specific, narrative is the container. Uh, it's all of what we do and use to say something. And inside of that container, we've got speech. Inside that container, we've got writing, acting, miming, whispering, symbolizing. I mean, it's endless, right? That's what narrative is. So it's not the same as story. I would just say narrative is the container, the story is the content. The content. Right. So the risks to divergent thinking. Now, yeah, I want to use an example, Lydia, that's very common in the believing community. Followers of the way are given to being quite simplistic at times. And they would say, oh, no, you're talking about this. This means this. Oh, this means that. So let's use something. Your daughter came home the other day with a song on her lips. What was the song? Then, if you want to sing it, you can sing it on the air. It will be your claim to fame.
Funny. But it's yeah, the song about Jonah. And then it says,
What
who did,
about
who
Jonah?
did, who did, who did, who did swallow joke, joke, joke. And then it repeats, and then the next line says, whale did, whale did, whale did, whale did, whale did swallow joke, 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 joke. Whale
Okay,
did
so
swallow Jonah down.
Jonah was swallowed by a whale. Now, here we have a 2.5 year plus old young girl, baby girl, singing a song that contains an assumption. What's the assumption? Jonah was swallowed by a whale. Okay? Now, of course, most followers of the way would say, yeah, that's true. But again, here's an example, Lydia, of uh, accepting things without thinking them through and without studying them, without verifying them, right? So a divergent thinker will do the hard thing. He'll go back into the text and reread the story and study it. And lo and behold, what does study show? Study shows that this word in the ancient text is the word migdol dag, or dag migdol. Dag is a fish. It's the Hebrew term for fish. And migdol means great or big, a big fish. And so 21st and 20th century Christians would just say, oh no, a whale swallowed him. So what are we doing? We're reading a 21st century scientific understanding back into an ancient text. I say to you, you've got no business doing that, because you must understand the text the way the ancient reader did, or the ancient hearer did. You can't foist your understanding, which is 21st century, back on a 6th century BC reader or hearer. It'd be totally unfair, right? Now that opens a whole area of study, which we're not going to go into in this episode, right? But if I show you from the text that what is in view is the idea of chaos, ancient Near Easterners understood that there was a God for everything, a God of the sea, a God of the mountains, right? A God who ruled the stars in the sky. It's like in Hinduism, a God for everything, right? At least a couple of million gods. And then you go into the text and you discover that the background is chaos, sea chaos. And sea chaos was created by sea monsters, right? And so the sea chaos god, if you were to call it that, the way I'm describing it now, the sea chaos god was Leviathan, right? Now you can go into the ancient historical or history sources, and there's a journal article in a journal called Henoch, Henoch, and you could possibly track it on the net. I haven't tracked it that way. I've tracked it quite a different way, but there's a lot of research that has been done over the decades that shows that the chaos in Jonah, end of Jonah 1 and Jonah 2, is the sea. Chaos in the sea. And out of that chaos rises the chaos god called Leviathan. And he's the sea dragon, not a dinosaur, right? A sea dragon. And so it's against the backdrop that this story is written. Now, it's irrelevant whether you believe Jonah is a parable or symbol. The image still holds. I'm not going into that discussion of parabolic or symbolic. The image is still there, right? And so we just assume it's this or it's that, instead of going in and doing the study and raise the issue that this is the chaos god, the sea god, God of the sea that is in view. Now that's thinking way outside the box, because the average person thinks inside the box. Oh no, this is a whale, right? Maybe you would call that convergent thinking. But divergent thinking says, let the story and the backdrop of the story determine the meaning. So when you study it deeply, you discover chaos God. So there your thinking diverges already from what is commonly held by most Christians. Oh no, it's a whale. Oh no, then they go into the discoveries of a whale that was caught or beached, and they sliced up the whale and they found human bodies and bones inside of the whale. That proves the point. And it ain't anything like it, because you are transporting a 21st century understanding and thinking into the text. And all of us run this risk, Lydia. It's not just some of us. Now, okay, now let's hear your response to that. How does that strike your ear?
Um, yeah, it kind of makes you feel as if you definitely didn't do any of the reading justice by not considering. And I'm even thinking as a teacher of English and language who does poetry and literature, that's where you go to first. So why we don't, or I don't translate the same skill and what I'm, challenging my students to do to understand context and story. You have to go back. You cannot import your own thinking of what you think this word means when you're talking about older texts. It's the same. And that's exactly what we've done with inverted
Right,
commas Bible stories.
right. Now, I think you're using a beautiful example. We've been taught that way, but yet we poo poo that idea because, again, we have this magical thinking idea that you must transport your understanding, your 21st century scientific understanding, back into the text. Okay, now I'm going to quote that source again, Lydia. It's Scott, I think it's Nagel or Nagel. I don't know how to pronounce the surname. Scott, Scott Noegel. Nagel. Scott Nagel. Let's just say it's Nagel. And the title of the journal article is Jonah and Leviathan: Inner Biblical Illusions and the Problem with Dragons. That's the title of this article. It's a scholarly journal called Henoch, or Henoch, Henoch, 37-2 of 2015. Henoch 37, I think it will be verse 2 or line 2, 2015. And it is available online at academia.edu. I've got Academia on my phone. You can actually
You said
subscribe
you.
to Academia and you can track it, you see. Now, if your historical background is showing you the backdrop, why in the world aren't you reading it against that backdrop? Right? Um, and the word dug in Hebrew uh, isn't just a normal word used for a generic fish, right? Um, in the Hebrew text, dug gadol, dug gadol. It's actually not Migdol, it's gadol, the great fish, right? And so you can check it in the Septuagint as well. That's the Greek translation of the Hebrew text, the Old Testament translation of the Hebrew text. So I'm just trying to track that page. Yeah, it's 237. And it tracks something of this idea. So it's a wonderful area to go into and very fascinating, right? So the fish is a dragon. It's actually a sea monster. Now, doesn't that sound like Genesis 3? A sea serpent, Leviathan, because creation was order out of chaos, right? In Genesis 3. And here you read about a serpent again. You see? Now, you see, this makes to me, Liz, makes the biblical text come alive. As you just said now, in English, in the English language, you come alive because all of a sudden you figure out, wow, listen to this background. You study Shakespeare against the backdrop of the Middle Ages, Middle English, right?
Yeah.
So there are risks to divergent thinking because people won't believe you. You'll come across as obscurantist. People will think, Way out in left field, man. Where do you get that stuff? Right? Let's use something more on the scene that's a little more relevant. Um, we talk about Calvinism, JC. It's actually the wrong date, JC, because it's supposed to be Jesus Christ, but we treat John Calvin and Arminius as two lesser gods, don't we? When you see how we elevate these two men, depending on which tradition you are in, you don't elevate the opposition, right? But if you're a Calvinist, you elevate John Calvin. If you're an Arminianist, you elevate Jacobus Arminius, right? And according to the traditional way of explaining this, Calvinists believe in the sovereignty of God over against the Arminian, they say, who doesn't. Of course, the Arminian explains it quite differently. And I would risk the divergent thinking of the scriptures lands in a very different place on both sides of the issue. All I want to go for is not Calvinism over against Arminianism and vice versa, but textual authority. What does the text say? Not what Calvin said, not what Arminius said, not what Augustine said. Right? Our American counterparts would say Augustine. Augustine or Augustine lived late 3rd century, early 4th century, right? And he happened to be an African, Lydia, a great theologian. I'm not saying he wasn't a sharp thinker. Happened to be an African, not a European, not a Brit, not a German, not even an American, but an African, right? If I remember correctly, he was born in Carthage, North African city. How's that for an African? And he rocked the theological world, and his thinking is still rocking the theological arena. Because Catholics and high Calvinists quote Augustine almost like with godlike authority. Okay. And so you have to say, now, where do you land? Well, you want to land on the side of textual authority. What evidence is there in the text that you are raising or reading for the position you espouse? Now, if you can't be sure about something, then you can't be sure. And it's amazing how theologians always want to have high certainty about everything. And when you can't be certain as a preacher, then the people view you as lomp. Yuta lompis. You can't think well. You don't have a sharp mind. And all you're saying is, I just don't know. We can't be dogmatic on this issue. But the evidence leans in this direction, or it pokes in this direction. So being a divergent thinker has risks, because you're probably going to end up with a minority position, and you're going to end up as part of the minority. But then again, God didn't need the crowds to work with. God just needed one man or one woman. One. Ezekiel was a man like that. One. I'm looking for a man who can stand in the breach, could stand in the gap in the wall, and I will give him a forehead of flint. I will make his forehead so hard that he'll be able to take the shots from the people as they try and ridicule him and hurt him. Yeah, so there's a price tag to everything. If you disbelieve something that is quite believable, you pay a price. If you believe something that is totally disbelievable and incorrect and fake news, you'll pay a price. But you see, we want risk-free living. So there are risks to divergent thinking out of the box, and being fresh and new and challenging people to think out of the box. But we're talking the same way we talked 50 years ago, and we haven't shifted. We speak with an accent and we think with an accent. And then, of course, it comes into the area of we have to rewrite the narrative because now the stories will change because the thinking is quite different. Prior to Apollo's landing on the moon, nobody believed you could put a man on the moon. There were all kinds of theories about what the moon was made of. Some believe that it was dust that were kilometers thick, that if we were to land on it, we'll disappear in the dust on the moon. And then Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, and there was a third character that slips my mind. They land on the moon safely. I remember listening to the radio on that, how they land in real time. And now there have been many rides to the moon. And now we're thinking Mars. Elon Musk is championing a drive like that for interesting reasons, right? But it's really thinking out of the box, and then the narratives are rewritten and the stories change. And that's our world we live in, Lydia. The world you live in is quite different than the world I grew up in. And I have to concede that, but I need to interact with that world, that changing world, the world of AI. Ooh, AI is wonderful, isn't it? AI doctor, Dr. AI, Dr. Google, right? I can say Dr. Safari, Dr. Google, and I can find out things that I never knew existed. Right, so let's hear some final thoughts from you, Lydia. The risks of divergent thinking.
I mean, the one thing I've picked up here initially started as the denotation of risk tends to be negative. And yet, we're talking about out of the box thinking. At no point are we saying, that the risk needs to go into a negative space, into a bad space. I think the examples we've used have shown both that
Yeah,
when you're not mindful of context and background and backdrop, which is all part of the story. I mean, I'm telling Isla stories, Little Red Riding Hood, and all of that. They come out of a context. They come out of
that's right.
a historical space because we live in a historical space and time.
That's
So
right. That's
it's
right.
just a reminder again that this can go whenever you're thinking outside of, can I use the word paradigm, or
Mm-hmm.
it can
Or
move you in a
frame.
certain way. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
outside
think
of
to
it.
be mindful, the warning is there in terms of risk. There's a price. Be mindful of the price that you are paying when you're thinking that way. So what are the rules? Can we say what are the rules are you playing with when you're trying to think through these and navigate through thinking outside? I don't know. Yeah.
No, this is very good. I mean, the example you're using, there are risks, there are positive, and there are also negative risks. But you need to navigate both the negative
Mm.
and the positive. Because if we didn't have people tinkering around in a laboratory, we would never have found the cure for smallpox. All right. And some of them were incidental and accidental. I think many of them were accidental. That
Mm.
scientists stumbled onto something and they had a hypothesis. They kept testing it, and kept it. And one day just voila. And we get the impression it came out of nowhere, right? And it always comes out of somewhere, right? Like your great
Yeah.
stories, your English literature stories come out of a context. Your proverbs come out of the context of stories. A proverb doesn't just end up as a sentence that rises in a vacuum. It rises out of the telling over and over and over again of stories. And there are lines that stick. A stitch in time saves nine. Rises out of the context of story. We just get this impression it rose out of nowhere. Proverbs are like that. They rise out of a context. And so divergent thinking also rises out of a context where one thing is believed as truth And then it's discovered, oh, that actually ain't true. There's a smidgen of truth there, but it, for the most part, isn't true. So this is an exciting area. So when we listen to people, let's listen
Yeah.
carefully, because the more you talk, I've often said, and I still stand with it, the more you talk, the more you give the game away.
Mm.
And the more I let you talk, the more you are going to give the game away.
Yeah.
A liar cannot be consistently trying to tell her the truth all the time. Some ways he just lies through his teeth. He tells the truth, but he mixes the lies in because he's basically a liar. He's not given to telling the truth. So we could spend hours on these topics, but again, listen carefully for where people are at, because they are going to betray where they are really at and what they really believe, because you will really live what you really believe. Let's thanks for your time this morning. We've gone 18 minutes, barely scratched the surface of the topic of the risks to divergent thinking and narratives that have to be rewritten as a result of divergent thinking. But we'll continue to plug away. So thank you for your time and have a good day, Lydia.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. You too.